So in this lecture, we'll look at how the wilds and their inhabitants are depicted in the Grimm's tales. We first find them in a place of safety and refuge from the inhumanity of civilization. Second, we'll find them to still be filled with the spirits and strangers of the woods, who in the Germanic tradition are closely associated with Odin, but in the American folk tradition quickly become the devil who wants to strike up a bargain. So what did you think of the tale, and how were the wilds described as a setting or provide traces of what we think could be a Germanic past? It begins with the waning of the kingdom. Without a queen, the kingdom is weakened, and she asks for her husband to only wed someone who is her equal, and inadvertently or perhaps intentionally setting up her daughter to be the only candidate and inheritor of the kingdom. So here we look at what is a father's role? Well, as a father, they need to protect, guide, and find a likely suitor for their daughter. But instead here, he imposes himself as a possible suitor. So he breaks his role, the expectations of the realm, and he poses a threat to her. He's no longer protecting her. The daughter's role is to obey her father, so she must work within the confines of the expectations to assuage his desire and circumvent the abuse by posing a challenge to him as her suitor, and a challenge which he thinks he will not meet, but he does. And so it tells us a little bit about the story that presents the idea that in the medieval period, to keep sort of wealth and property within the family, there was very close ties. And so there's hinting at incest here in terms of keeping the property within the family that she would inherit it. And it forces then Alfred to flee to the forest. And here the forest really is then a place of refuge. It offers her safety. And every time she needs to flee, to escape, she runs to the tree as the safe place. And you can see the similarities here to Cinderella, where she is perhaps just like Cinderella, forced to menial labor. She has to hide as an animal does in trees, and she is accused of being a witch in this tale. And eventually she must be tricked then into marriage. After her escape, she can finally remove herself from this imminent danger, but the story is set up in a way that we don't really know where we are in relation to where she began. It is the second part that then Alfred demonstrates the steps by which to win a husband, to not show him the beauty underneath, to woo him with skill and hints, to remain elusive, to awaken desire, curiosity, and to encourage him to chase or hunt for her. His slipping the ring onto her finger is, along with the other symbolic marriage tokens that he slips into the soup, they're all a sign of his commitment to marriage to her. And while she is not as blatant, she sends him the signal first through the soup in the form of the ring. So here we see that she has taken on the role of the parent when his behavior is disappointing, and then again as a suitor to make things happen for herself. The only problem remaining is that it is never quite clear whether she has traveled far enough to escape her father, or even if this is not her father, the king she marries, is it simply a substitute, or is she committing some kind of psychological incest by looking for, pursuing, and marrying a man much like him? So in Hans my Hedgehog, we have a very striking depiction of abuse meted out to Hans as a child. He's forced to sleep in straw behind a stove, objectified, and is wished death upon him by his father. It is perhaps reminiscent of the post-birth abortive murders of infants who were born with deformities or defects in the north. In Norway, we have some examples of this. If they were unchristened, if they were like Hans, they were born with a lot of hair, and they were refused burial in the church cemetery. So his later fortune seeking, bringing back fortune to his father, demonstrates how many unwanted children still seek to please their parents, even if they don't deserve really the child's attention anymore. It is an attempt to confirm their rights to exist. We also get a view into the importance placed upon education, as Hans can be swindled out without understanding the written contract. It also points out to the distrust of the common folk of those who are educated. Will they honor their word? We can also see that it is ultimately compassion, acceptance of Hans that allows him to then shed his defenses and show his vulnerability to his wife, that there is under even hardened shell a person who craves tenderness. And then we have with Iron Hans. In this tale, we have one of the most common dwellers of the wilds, the wild man, also seen in other tales as a stranger, a traveler. As conversion happens, many sites of religious importance become transferred to building sites of churches. And they are That's primarily because it's a natural collecting space of the community. And other traditions are similarly taken over and incorporated. For example, Christmas and Easter, fertility rituals, and the summer and winter solstice celebrations are combined or laid over with a very thin veil. So Santa is sort of the Odinic wild hunt tradition. The Christmas tree is the venerated sacred tree. The Easter egg and rabbits are symbols that play heavily in fertility pagan celebrations as well. So the sacrifice of prisoners and slaves into bogs was a practice that was discovered. And in the 1960s in Denmark, the bodies were so well preserved that they thought them to be from recent crimes. The bogs from which bog iron was taken was a key technology of the Viking Age. This is where our stranger in the woods, Odin, who goes by many different names, comes in. And it's a trace of this Odinic wanderer who would surprise kings after the riddling contest, usually with death. Well, Ian Hans produces several associations that would make him a possible candidate for our Odinic wanderer. These include the swamp where he is found, his name recognizing the importance of the bog and the wishes he grants the king's son. The patron god of royalty was Odin, so from which all Germanic royalty chieftains were supposedly derived. And then the gift of the horse, the victory in battle, and the defeat of the red, black, and white knights, the colors of the Prussian flag. They could suggest that this tale is derived from an older pagan tale. Similar associations can also be made for the house in the forest and the boots of buffalo leather, in which we have a stranger. In the woods, there is a similar testing of daughters as there were hunters. They do not survive or return. It demonstrates that one must be a good servant, caring for nature and animals. So in the boots of buffalo leather, we have the emphasis on hospitality, tradition to offer safe shelter for those traveling, because any of them could be Odin, that only those with no fear will be able to join Odin in Valhalla. It becomes a demand in our tale. So drinking, poetry, and magic are also associated with Odin. And we have here his evocation after having taken the drink, thereby freezing the bandits in place who have broken the rule of hospitality. And when they return, it is revealed that the stranger was the king who was on his return journey. So these tales are, as they are transformed by writers such as Washington Irving, upon the Puritan backdrop of the early United States, they set the stranger then as the devil. So in this lecture, we have looked at the role of the forest in Germany and the wilds in its traditional narratives, and the Germanic veneration of the woods and of nature is long attested to in descriptive histories, economic practices, and narratives. We can see that these tales offer refuge to the abuse, sustenance for the starving, and a place of mystery and magic for the wandering. In our next lecture, we'll examine then more the aspects of horror and violence in some of the Grimm's tales.